December 17th, 1944. The Ardennes forest. Bitter cold. Heavy snow, muffled silence. German infantrymen of the 2nd Panzer Division crouch low in a narrow trench line, the breath from their mouths hanging like ghosts in the frozen air. The Battle of the Bulge had begun 3 days earlier, and already the fields of Belgium reeked of diesel and cordite. The Germans were pressing forward, confident. Their panzers and MG-42s had pushed the enemy back before. They could do it again. Then came the sound. Not the sharp chatter of a rifle, not even the staccato rip of an MG. This was deeper, heavier. It cracked the air like a thunderclap that refused to fade, a booming rhythm that tore through the forest like some mechanical beast. Awakening Unteroffizier. Karl Meyer raised his head above the trench just long, enough to see sparks ricochet off a nearby half-track. His first thought, artillery, but the pattern was too precise, the origin too close. He squinted through the snowfall, scanning the tree line, then he saw it, mounted on the turret of an American M4. Sherman sitting half-hidden in the brush, a stubby, smoking barrel, wider than any machine gun he'd ever seen, belt-fed, crew-served, and still roaring. The M2. Browning .50 caliber machine gun. It was unlike anything the Wehrmacht had faced up close. Rounds cracked through tree trunks. A single burst tore a hole clean through the side of a German truck, shattering glass and igniting its fuel line in seconds. The dense smell of burning oil and pine filled the air. Meyer shouted for his men to fall back, but their shouted commands were drowned in the mechanical roar. .50 caliber bullets didn't just kill them, they obliterated. They splintered cover that once felt safe, ripped apart engine blocks, and chewed through walls that should have offered protection. One burst could cut an aircraft out of the sky. Another could stop a charging half-track cold. As Meyer crawled deeper into the snow, the truth began to set in. This wasn't just a new gun. This was a message. A few men whispered in disbelief. Ein Maschinengewehr? So stark? They had seen the infamous Browning on the Western Front before the retreat, but few understood what it was capable of. Now, staring at the devastation around them, they did. The battlefield had changed forever, and they knew it, because what Meyer's unit didn't realize was that this weapon wasn't new. The Americans had perfected it decades earlier, and now it had reached its moment of undeniable dominance. But how did this gun come to exist? Before that frigid day in the Ardennes, the M2 Browning .50 caliber machine gun was already legendary in American military circles. Designed by the master gunmaker John Moses Browning near the end of World War I, this heavy machine gun was born out of a pressing need articulated by General John J. Pershing himself. Pershing demanded a weapon capable of firing a round of at least half an inch in diameter with the power to pierce armor and unleash destruction far beyond the limits of the standard issue. Rifles and machine guns, you can almost feel the heat emanating from the gun's barrel, a robust 45 inches of steel designed to endure relentless fire. Despite its weight, about 84 pounds for the ground-based 2HB model, it boasted a rate of fire between 485 and 635 rounds per minute. Mounted on the familiar Sherman tank as the AN-M2 aircraft version, it was even lighter and faster, firing up to 850 rounds per minute with a barrel length trimmed down for aerial combat. Its cartridge, the .50 BMG Browning machine gun round, was a force unto itself, capable of punching through 1 inch of hardened steel at 250 yards, something unheard of in small arms until that point. This meant that no light, armored vehicle or enemy aircraft was safe when under the relentless hail of the M2's fire. The belt-fed mechanism ensured a near-continuous stream of bullets, tearing through wood, steel, and flesh alike. The M2 was no mere machine gun. It was an instrument of intimidation, a brutal enforcer that altered the calculus of combat. For the German troops who encountered it, this was a rude awakening. Their Panzerfausts, rifles, and MG-42s were suddenly much less adequate in the face of a weapon that could rip the sky, ground or steel apart with impunity. What the Germans didn't immediately understand was that this weapon had not appeared overnight. It was the product of years of refinement. Air-cooled, recoil-operated, designed to fire from a closed bolt for accuracy, and to sync with aircraft triggers. It had become a deadly symbol of American industrial power and battlefield innovation. But how did the Germans initially react when this thunderous beast opened fire on them in the frozen Ardennes? How did it shift their tactics and morale? And how did the Americans wield it to devastating effect in both ground and air combat? The first hours after the M2's debut were chaos. As German squads scrambled for cover, the eerie realization set in. Their trusted tactics were failing. The icy Ardennes wind whipped away the sound of shouted orders. Any movement drew furious, high-velocity fire. Even behind supposedly safe barricades, men flinched as 50 cal slugs blasted through timber and stone, sending splinters and screams skyward. Oberleutnant Hans Feldman, a veteran of Normandy and Market Garden, tucked behind the wheel housing of a second Ches 251 half-track. The familiar roar of the MG-42, once a comfort, now seemed thin, suppressed by the deep thunder of the American heavy machine gun. Feldman's men tried flanking maneuvers. They were repelled with torrents of lead that shattered their confidence and equipment alike. For many, survival meant adaptation. Feldman's radio crackled with desperate reports. Der Ami hat etwas Neues. Durchschlägt alles. The American has something new. It pierces everything. Orders changed on the fly. Units abandoned stationary defensive lines in favor of fast, unpredictable movement. Scout patrols crept miles off the main advance, searching for gun positions. With a caution bordering on paranoia, night brought no respite. M2 crews trained to fix targets by the muzzle flash of German rifles unleashed short, calculated bursts that cleaved through darkness and kept enemy heads down. It was as if the silhouette of a Sherman or Jeep with its mounted Deuce was enough to reshape the entire rhythm of battle, forcing the Wehrmacht onto unfamiliar ground. You can picture the exhaustion on Feldman's face, the haunted look of men who now doubted the strength of their armor, their leadership, their very odds of making it home. Each new engagement spread fear. Rumors of impossibly powerful Amerikanische Maschinengewehr filtered through the ranks, swelling with every retold account of wounded vehicles and torn-apart defensiveness. What the Allies realized was just as important. The Browning was more than firepower. It was psychological warfare, a specter that followed every American advance and every German retreat. But as the fronts shifted and the battles moved beyond the forests, the true legacy of the M2 would stretch far beyond this one winter. The weapon's impact on tactics, morale, and future design would echo across the war. But would the Germans find an answer to the 50 cal? Or would its reign of shock and devastation continue unchallenged, shaping the outcome of battles yet to come? Throughout the bitter winter and into the spring, the M2 Browning's legend only grew. German commanders issued new orders. Avoid open roads. Keep moving. Never let the enemy fix your position. Even veteran tank crews now eyed the thick steel skin of their vehicles with unease, knowing that a lucky shot from a 50 caliber could punch through weak spots or disable vital components. The sound of its firing, heavy, relentless, impossible to miss, became a signature of looming American power. But the effect wasn't just psychological. The M2's rounds bit through aircraft hulls, shredded lightly armored vehicles, and shattered field fortifications that once seemed impenetrable. American bomber crews trusted the weapon's belt-fed reliability in thousand-foot dogfights, while GIs on the ground used it to sweep suspected ambush sites before ever approaching recon by fire, as it was known. Some squads even rigged up extra armor for their M2 gunners, desperate to keep them alive atop exposed tanks and trucks in the Ardennes. Snowdrifts glittered with spent 50 cal casings, their gleam a silent testament to the battle's new rules. For every German counterattack repulsed by the thundering Browning, word traveled. One squad claimed to have seen a single burst cut through a truck, a hedgerow, and two men sheltering on the far side. Each retelling only reinforced the weapon's fearsome reputation, especially among those who had seen its handiwork up close. And still, the Germans tried to adapt. Makeshift shields, bolder tactics at night, desperate races for tree cover. Nothing could erase the advantage the Americans now held in firepower and reach. The battlefield had shifted, and with it, the story of the war in Europe. But as the Allies marched east, would even the M2's dominance prove enough against Germany's next wave of secret weapons? As the war edged toward its final months, the M2 Browning had earned itself a place not just as a weapon of destruction, but as a symbol of American ingenuity and resilience. Its brutal effectiveness, in both ground and air combat, had forced the Wehrmacht to rethink old doctrines and contend with a new form of firepower that seemed to transcend the traditional limitations of a machine gun. Sergeant John Murphy's stand near the French village of Holzwehr captures the spirit of the M2's impact. Despite being wounded and exposed on a burning tank destroyer, Murphy's relentless use of the 50 caliber weapon held off waves of German infantry, killing scores and buying critical time for retreating comrades. His action exemplified the weapon's dual role as both a tool of raw killing power and a psychological anchor for American forces under Siege, meanwhile, across the battlefields of Europe and the Pacific. Stories flickered of how the Deuce prevented ambushes, shredded enemy aircraft, and provided suppressive fire that saved countless lives. Its versatility, from mounted tank gun to tripod defense, from aircraft armament to handheld assault gun, made it irreplaceable. Even after World War II, the M2 Browning's legacy continued. It served in Korea, Vietnam, and numerous conflicts up to the present day, a testament to its enduring design and the unmatched power that first shocked German troops during the frozen days of the Ardennes. Few weapons have matched its blend of accuracy, firepower, and psychological dominance, the very elements that transformed the battlefield and redefined modern warfare. Yet, despite its fearsome reputation, the M2 remains a weapon carried by human hands, subject to the grit, courage, and will of the soldiers who wielded it and faced it. This brutal instrument of war reminds us that behind every thunderous volley lies a story of endurance, innovation, and the relentless pursuit of victory. And as the dust settled over Europe and the guns fell silent, the shadow of the 50 caliber machine gun still loomed, large, forever etched as one of the most feared and decisive weapons of World War II. Andy. When the thunder of the M2 Browning echoed across Europe, a ripple effect swept through Allied and Axis lines alike. Machine gun teams began to modify their defensive strategies, learning to mask muzzle flashes and reposition rapidly to avoid becoming easy targets. The Germans, observing the devastation left in the wake of Deuce, realized the battlefield's calculus had changed. The presence of a single 50 caliber could break ambushes and halt armored advances in their tracks. American officers ordered recon by fire, sending streams of 50 caliber rounds into suspected ambush zones. Before patrols advanced, the sound of smashing wood and ricocheting steel shaking nerves on both sides. Infantrymen, once reliant on cover and smoke, now watched those defenses dissolve under the onslaught of armor-piercing rounds that chewed through barricades and engine blocks alike. Every engagement bred new stories, one about a tank destroyer, aflame and exposed, buying time for a crucial retreat, another of a field, churned up and layered with spent casings, where German counterattacks sputtered out against a line of sandbags and Browning fire. By spring 1945, the M2's reputation was cemented, not only for its impossible range and devastating firepower, but for its ability to inspire dread. Ammunition belts hung from tank turrets like iron garlands, and Allied troops trusted the gun's reliability through mud, snow, and shrapnel. The weapon helped define the aggressive, mobile tactics of American advances, and its shadow fell long over post-war battlefields. How would future wars remember the signature sound of the M2's roar, and the fear it imprinted on every soldier, pilot, and commander who heard it? The last months of World War II turned the M2 Browning from a feared weapon into a global icon. Its profile became a symbol of American might, from the ruined villages of the Ardennes to the battered islands of the Pacific. Gunners draped with bandoliers manned exposed tank turrets, scanning the horizon for sudden threats. Aircrews kneeling behind their Browning 50s peered through bombers' glass domes as Allied formations pushed ever deeper into Axis-held territory. In one striking episode, Allied troops crossing the battered bridge at Remagen fired volley after volley to cover their engineers, the 50 cal's thunder driving back desperate counterattacks. In countless air raids, the sight of a B-17's nose bristling, with Brownings reassured, crews bracing to run the gauntlet of flak and interceptors. From sniper nests to anti-aircraft pits, the Deuce marked the line between survival and defeat, its mechanical rhythm a grim soundtrack to victory and loss. When the guns finally fell silent, the M2 had imprinted itself on the very memory of the war, a weapon that shifted strategies, saved and ended lives, and left its unmistakable mark on every front it touched. Andy.